Welcome back to a special edition of Politics Nation, live from Sanford, Florida, where all eyes are on the new special prosecutor, Angela Corey. She's now in charge of investigating the case and will decide whether to pursue an arrest warrant for George Zimmerman or go to the grand jury. She's already saying it won't be a quick process.
That young man deserves justice. His parents deserve answers, and we're going to make sure that they both get that. So we're going to take as much time as we need to find out every fact and circumstance.
Corey is a Republican from Jacksonville, Florida, who was elected state attorney in 2008 after being endorsed by local sheriffs who praised her as, quote, aggressive and tough. Before now, she was best known for prosecuting a 12-year-old as an adult in a murder case. Meanwhile, the fight for justice is on in Washington, too. The Justice Department is investigating whether Trayvon's shooting constitutes a hate crime. The House Judiciary Committee will hold a brief hearing tomorrow on racial profiling and hate crimes. And Senator Chuck Schumer is calling for investigations into the Stand Your Ground laws, already on the books in 24 states. Joining me now is Congressman Emanuel Cleaver, Democrat from Missouri and chair of the Congressional Black Caucus. Also with me is NBC News political analyst Governor Ed Rendell, who vetoed the Stand Your Ground law when he was governor of Pennsylvania. Thanks for joining me tonight, gentlemen.
Good to be with you, Reverend.
Governor, when you vetoed the law, you said it, quote, encourages the use of deadly force at a shoot first, ask questions later mentality. Do you think that's what we're seeing in this case here in Florida?
There's no question. Under the old common law that prevailed in the United States of America, there would be no question that George Morrison was guilty. He had the duty to retreat. He was in a car. He could have avoided the confrontation by just turning that car around and going somewhere else. So that's the old law. But under this new law, let's assume everything that we know happened. But at the last second, there was a confrontation, and let's say Trayvon did something that Zimmerman thought threatened him. Then he could use the stand and defend law and say, look, at that moment, I didn't have to retreat because the law says I don't have to retreat. And at that moment, I felt reasonably threatened. It's ridiculous. And in fact, when I vetoed the law, Rev, I quoted the head of the District Attorneys Association, who was a Republican, Ron Marsico from Central Pennsylvania, who said, all this law will do, it's a problem, it's a problem for a solution for a problem that doesn't exist, and all it will do is give violent criminals opportunities to get off.
Now, Chairman Cleaver, I remember not long after all of us got involved in the case, you and the Congressional Black Caucus stepped forward and called on the Justice Department to intervene, which they have now come in. We've met with them. Some of the members of the caucus are here tonight at the public hearing with all of us. Do you feel that the Justice Department also ought to investigate the police? And is the caucus taking a position on this law that we are talking about with Governor Rendell?
Well, first of all, Reverend, let me just say, 40 years ago, this would have already melted away, and I think we've got to realize that people like you staying on top of this is the reason that we're still dealing with it. Number one, the caucus did ask for the Justice Department to intervene. They did. We think that there must be some kind of deep penetrating look into the police department at Sanford, Florida. There is something awfully wrong there. As I've said before, in Kansas City when I was mayor, and I think Governor Rendell would say the same thing about Philadelphia, if a police officer shot somebody, even if it was justifiable, that police officer was immediately suspended with pay pending an investigation. And in most cases, the officer is vindicated. We had a shooting in Florida where a man shot a kid, 17 years old, in the chest and was able to go home. So we think that something needs to happen to the police department in terms of an investigation. And secondly, it does appear that justice is limping along, albeit very slowly, and so I guess it will eventually get there. But we're going to need the Justice Department involved. The Justice Department can do what the state Attorney General may not be able to do.
Let me ask you, Mr. Chairman, do you think it's moving too slowly? I heard you say limping. Do you think it's too slowly?
Well, obviously, because of my deep feelings, I would like for it to move faster, but I don't want it to move fast if something is going to be left out. But in the meantime, for people like me, I have 3 boys, and every African-American male with boys, and anybody can stop any man on the street, and he will tell you, I've told my sons, if they're stopped by police, make sure your hands are seen, don't talk smart. You know, you've gone through it, everybody's gone through it. Well, now, we've got to come up with something else to say to deal with vigilantism. And so the sooner this thing is dealt with, the sooner we, I think, can go on with the business of trying to figure out some new ways to deal with the whole issue of neighborhood watch. We've got to have some laws that would regulate what's going to happen and what does happen with these neighborhood watch programs. We probably need people to be certified before they can do it.
Yeah. Now, Governor Rendell, despite increased scrutiny, many other states, Iowa, Alaska, New York, Nebraska, Massachusetts, are pushing forward with stand your ground laws, and one was vetoed just a couple of weeks ago in Minnesota. Are you concerned these dangerous laws, and you vetoed one, are becoming law in more places?
Sure, absolutely. And remember, under the old law, this guy would have been arrested on the night in question. There was absolutely no defense. He didn't retreat. He had a duty to retreat under the old law. He would have been arrested. There was no dispute. Under this law, there's disputes, and it's a ridiculous law that promotes violence and gives an excuse for people who want to perpetrate violence. We ought to repeal these laws. And if people want to do something in Trayvon's name, I think in every state that has a law, we ought to be pushing to repeal it. And in those states that are contemplating a law, we should be saying, we're not going ahead. In Pennsylvania, Al, the sad part is that literally a couple of months after I left office, the legislature passed the law and Governor Corbett signed it. So it's the law in Pennsylvania as well.
Sad.
Now, let me ask you, Congressman Cleaver, there's been a lot of talk back and forward about the defense attorney in this case going back and forward, 1 minute saying self-defense, the next minute saying that it was not self-defense. On Friday, he said, quote, that's, and he was talking about the stand your ground law, that's not really applicable to this case. Then yesterday he says, I believe stand your ground is going to be applicable to this case. So clearly a defense attorney is going to do whatever is necessary to help his client. But is not the fact that this law can be used in such a way that could, in fact, inflict more harm on innocent people, is that the concern that you have when you keep saying this new law and how bad it is?
It's encouraging vigilantism. We're going to create a nation of lone rangers who believe that they have the right to patrol and act as a police officer. We're going to have people who can do revenge against people and say that they felt threatened. Look, here's the danger of this situation. We're going to have, I think, every young African-American male walking around with a high level of paranoia. And what I would like to say to everybody is that the most dangerous thing we can do is not do anything about the fear we have. And the fear is that these laws will continue to mushroom. And keep in mind that the number of shootings have just accelerated in Florida since this law was passed. So that's proof positive that we're going to have more and more shootings.
Congressman Cleaver and Governor Rendell, I'm going to have to hold it there. Thank you both for your time tonight.